I have been reflecting in the last couple of weeks. It is coming up to my 11 years in business, and it's a natural time for me to reflect and pause. It made me pause and reflect on everything that has come in the last 11 years, and also how important it is to have these moments to really stop, to look back, but also to look forwards to gain clarity. It's something that I also recognized in the first of my leadership breakfasts, which I hosted last week. This was a new concept that I brought to life. 9 different leaders coming from across different industries, from very different cultures, and coming together into one room in London. Yes, for breakfast, but also to really come together for thinking, space to reflect, to get clarity, which was the theme for this first breakfast, and to really benefit from the collective of thinking. Now, I very intentionally set up this space, and it was about no formal agenda. And I didn't want any presentations or panels or even any formal introductions or networking. In fact, I set it up very much in a way where it felt safe and confidential. So we were on a first name basis only with each other. But the power of that room was to bring people together for that space to reflect, to give them that time to really think about what's going on right now with their own leadership, wherever they are on that journey. Some were more experienced leaders, some were aspiring or almost at the point of becoming leaders, but there was many different perspectives and everybody benefited from that. So what I wanted to share in this episode was not necessarily what was said by individuals in the room. As I said, it was a confidential space. But what I do want to share is my own personal reflections, what I took out of it, and what I think is helpful to you when you are considering your own leadership. So, first of all, I want to start with this. Why leaders need this thinking space? Well, I'm sure you recognize this as well. This is not easy when you're in constant operational delivery, even as a leader. There is very little space for this. There is constant running. There is a constant focus on what is the answer. You're often in reaction mode rather than in thoughtful response. You're often in meetings and being pressurized for decisions. And so the idea of having an hour even to reflect, to stop, to really consider what's going on, that feels a luxury to not only the people who are in that room, but to many of the clients that I work with. It just doesn't feel very feasible. So I understand this. Having that time to think is really tricky. And I brought that theme of clarity because I see it time and time again. Getting clarity is not easy. So the question that I was asking is, what kind of clarity is it that is tricky, that is missing? Is it about clarity of thinking? Is it about clarity of communication? Or is it more about organizational clarity and creating clarity for others? One of the most interesting overarching themes is that actually many people were talking about it's difficult to get clarity in relationships. That whether that is relationships with people above you in the chain, with your peers, or with people who are reporting into you. So this was somewhere we spent a lot of the time of the conversation around. And maybe that's something for you to think about now. Where is it that the clarity is lacking right now? We talked about many different points. And as I say, much of that is confidential, so I won't share this here. But I will share with you the one final question that I did ask them, which is all about where and how can you get more clarity? What is one action that you can take, one small step? And that is something I'd love for you to listen to this episode today and really consider for yourself. How do you get this clarity for yourself? Not in a big, grand gesture sort of way, but with one small step. I'm going to share some of the outtakes that I took from this conversation, from the leadership breakfast, that I hope are helpful for you. And let's come back to this question at the end. One big theme, one big learning for me is that clarity often comes from conversation. I recognize this also with the clients that I work with, that sometimes it's just really difficult to work out the solutions to challenges by yourself. Isolating yourself, sitting in glorious isolation, trying to work through those questions without stimulus can be very tricky because your brain is full, because you're feeling the pressure of time, and because sometimes it's not even clear what is the question you should be asking yourself. So thinking alone can be hard, and that's why it is easier to come together in a group, to come together to have conversations, natural conversations that spark different thoughts and ideas in your mind. Part of this as well was also recognizing that being a leader is lonely. If you're in that spot, then you may have maybe one other person above you. But even if you have several, it can feel quite lonely within the organization. Maybe you don't feel like you can turn to your peers. Maybe there are challenges and questions that are too big and knotty, involve personal issues that you don't feel comfortable or safe to share that within the organization. That's where the concept of the sparring partner can be very powerful. Now, this was one idea that came up in conversation, and it's an interesting concept. It's something that I sometimes act as when I'm working with my clients as well. Having somebody who can challenge you, question you, who can check your assumptions, make sure that you are not just looking at it through blinkers, through your tunnel vision, and help you test your ideas is so valuable. Others in the room at that leadership breakfast talked about it as well, how important it was for them to have somebody they could go to ask a question, to have a quick 10-minute check-in, and just almost speak out loud what they were thinking and get perspective on it. So that idea of getting clarity with a sparring partner can be incredibly powerful. So this was the first idea. Getting clarity by thinking alone is not easy. Clarity through conversation is more powerful. The second idea that came up very much is that leadership conversations are often really challenging. There's a lot going on right now. There's a lot of uncertainty, ambiguity. People are often looking for the answers, and organizations are often going through flux and change. Having a space where you can download that, a space where you can talk to others, where you can even just be a little bit, express those frustrations and those negative feelings can be helpful, because in some spaces at work, you need to hold it all together. But you want to also have that space where you can just let it go. And also an environment that is neutral. Sometimes people want to do that with family, with loved ones. But the reality is there's always an agenda there. They're always going to potentially either see it from your side or maybe be very, very challenging about why you're thinking like that. Useful to have is a space, a group conversation where you can just say it as it is, where you can just be honest and you can trust the other people are not going to react to you in those ways. They're going to respond thoughtfully with questions, help you step back and see it differently. So that was the next theme, that leadership conversations are often really challenging. So you want to have a space where you can process that. Connected to that, the next theme is really about the emotional toll of leadership. I know from the leaders that I work with that you're holding a lot. You're holding so much every day, and that can feel very heavy, that emotional baggage, whether it's your own emotions, the emotions of others, what's happened historically, or what you're anticipating and coming up. There's always a lot there to hold. And so again, trying to deal with that by yourself and process that by yourself is really, really tricky. Having that emotional support is helping you to move through from leadership being lonely to having the support around you. Having that safe space to reflect, to pause, to be able to say what you're really thinking with people who understand you and are not going to judge you. I think that is very, very important. And what I reflected from the leadership breakfast was people came out of that space saying that they felt they could really be honest and share. And that matters to me deeply. Small actions create clarity. We saw this in the room, in the leadership breakfast. What we talked about in that room wasn't just about creating massive changes to leadership styles or to thinking or trying to change radically your schedule or calendar. It really wasn't about that. It was about small steps. It was about practical ideas and actions that people could take to get more clarity in their everyday, whatever that clarity challenge was for them. We talked about the things that have worked for other individuals around that table. And I brought my perspectives as well. I was facilitating the conversation, but also bringing my thoughts and ideas. And that really is important because ultimately, as leaders as well, there is not a lot of time to be taking on lots of radical changes in behavior or what you're doing in your everyday. So this was important, creating a little bit of space to identify those very practical actions that people could take away. And one of the key questions I asked at the end of the leadership breakfast was, what is one action you're going to take away from today? Because when we say it out loud, we commit to it. We make it happen. So even if you, in theory, know what you need to change to make things clearer in your own leadership, sometimes that's not enough. Saying it out loud in front of a group creates momentum. It creates an energy, which means you're much more likely to do it. So this was also very important, the small actions that create the clarity. As you can see, there are some very powerful reflections that came from this leadership breakfast. I didn't want to share the confidential details of what specifically was discussed, but you can see the reflections I took from it and how that could apply in your everyday. I set up these leadership breakfasts because I could see that this was missing. I can see that there are lots of spaces which are about leadership training. I can see lots of spaces which are about networking, either formally or informally, but they're not, I think, what's needed right now in this day and age. I think it is much better to create smaller, quality conversational spaces where people come together in person to really build the trust between them, but also to really tap into the collective wisdom, the collective knowledge, bringing different perspectives that spark new ideas and new actions that can help all of the individuals around that table. Having seen the power of this, I'm really passionate about it. The space of 9 people coming together, very different industries, very different cultures, and learning from each other, I could see this worked. And from my perspective, what I'm really committed to do now is take these leadership breakfasts further. Currently, I'm running these in London. So if you are a leader in London and you would love to get involved in this and be part of the invitation list for these small, intimate, confidential gatherings to help with your own clarity. I'm organising my next leadership breakfast dates, and I'd love to invite you to those. But equally, I know that many of you are not based in London. In fact, much of my work is around the world. And so I don't want this to be the restrictor. I do passionately believe this works best when it's in person. And I love facilitating these conversations. So if you're based in another city, another country, and you would love for me to come to your city and create this leadership breakfast in your environment, then I would love to do that to help you also experience the power of this, experience the benefits of this as a leader. Reach out to me. And again, let's have a conversation how we create this for you. Whatever your interest, whether in London or whether abroad, the best way to do this is just to message me over on LinkedIn. My personal profile, Victoria Reynoldson. My surname is spelled Rennoldsson. And I would love to have you on that invitation list so that when the events, the dates, as I said, I'm lining up right now, I can make sure that you're part of the next leadership breakfast and you can benefit it for yourself. Thank you so much for joining me for this reflection episode. I would love to end this episode, as I always do, with some questions for you. Where are you having your conversations right now? How are you creating quality time and space to really get the clarity that you need? And this idea of the sparring partner, who is this for you? And if you haven't got that person, who could it be? Is there somebody in your world or outside your world who could help you with this? Thank you so much for joining me for this episode, for listening in. It's my great pleasure to share these episodes, and I'm really excited that you could be with me today. Look forward to seeing you next time.